Hello, everyone. This is the Mind Your Movies podcast. Wanted to start off. This is episode 9.5. We're talking about House, Nobuhiko Obayashi's House. But before we get into that, we wanted to mention that we're recording this a little early. So it's Thursday, January 16th, and David Lynch just passed away. It was announced today. Obviously, incredible filmmaker. And yeah, it was kind of he had emphysema, so it's not like out of the blue, I guess, but it wasn't expected. So definitely a weird day, sad news. So if that just wanted to mention that, rest in peace to David Lynch. And yeah, if the episode is weird, that might be why. but uh but I mean, we're covering a great movie, so yeah.
That's right. But in the meantime, I'm Ryan.
Yes, I'm Shane.
And this
Those
is the
are our
Mind Your
names.
Movies podcast.
Yes.
So here we go. We're talking about House. Yeah.
Yeah,
1977.
this I don't know, we kind of just picked it because we both really like the movie, and we thought it'd be fun to talk about, I guess. So
Yeah. Yeah. I saw it for the first time just before the new year and was pretty stoked. It was pretty awesome. And so when we were trying to think of one of our half episodes, Shane was like, let's just do House. Right. And so Shane had seen it before, but you just rewatched it, right?
yes, yeah, this is like I think my third time seeing it, and yeah, I definitely am like has high rewatch value. I think it's such a fun creative movie. Um, so yeah, it's get into it a little bit. The background, it's from 1977. Like I said, directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, and he also was the producer and he did the special effects. He's credited for the special effects. And screenplay is by Chiho Katsura, and the story is by Chigumi Obayashi, who is the director's daughter. And apparently, or I don't know, I think you might know more about the background of this, but the movie is influenced by like his daughter's ideas, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of her like fears as a kid, right? So this was made when she was a kid. It's kind of funny actually. I didn't notice that she was credited for the story. But yeah, she apparently like went to the set like all the time and even like helped people figure out like how to react to certain scary things, right? Because they were like things that scared her, right? And so he was trying to build this based on those fears that were, I mean, I would say like pretty relevant to any kid, right? Like just thinking about some of the stuff that happens. Like, I mean, in its core, this is kind of a haunted house movie. And a lot of stuff that happens here, it's like, yeah, in an old creepy house, if you've ever been in an old creepy house, things like the grandfather clock or the old piano are just scary, right? So it makes sense to like exploit those fears and to have such like a raw perspective on that from his daughter really worked, I think. But
Yeah, definitely. It's cool. Probably one of the youngest credited filmmakers ever.
yeah,
Writers.
how yeah, I think I mean like how old was she during this? Do you remember? Do you
Well,
know?
she was born in 1964, so she was 13 when it came out. But I
Ah,
know it took them a couple years to make it. Like he had trouble. It's Toho Studios, who's like known for the Godzilla movies, um, and there was like a few years where oh, Nobuhiko Obayashi was having trouble getting the financing, and this seems like it's his first feature film, I think.
I think it
He
is.
has like a
Yeah.
lot of credits for like sort of short experimental films and stuff like that. But then after this, it looks like he was pretty prolific in the 70s and 80s. This is the only movie of his I've seen, so I'm not an expert, but yeah, so I don't know when she had these ideas and came up with the story and all that, but probably when she was, you know, 10-ish.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, it is basically a haunted house movie. The It's also kind of a slasher. Like it
Yeah.
has the structure of a slasher movie, but basically there's like these seven high school girls, and they go on a trip to pretty much the main girl. Her name is Gorgeous, and all these girls go to Gorgeous's aunt's house, and scary, spooky things happen to them. And that's basically the rundown of the movie. I mean,
Yeah, the plot is definitely like that is the plot of the movie. Like there's not a lot that in a way it does feel a lot like a slasher movie because of that, right? Like the plot is that there's a creepy guy in a mask or something, right? But in this it's just there's a creepy house.
yeah. And her aunt and the cat are kind of haunting. They have special supernatural abilities of some sort. And yeah, but basically, really, the main selling point of the movie is all the crazy special effects and all the filmmaking tricks and crazy editing and just how wacky the movie is. The tone is very. I mean, it is a horror movie, I guess, but it's really a horror comedy.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's just it's a very fun movie, but also it's very creative in the way it uses like filmmaking technique. So I think that's part of the reason that it is so beloved by a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think one of the really interesting things about this is that uh, Obayashi was like coming from, I think, a lot of commercial and like short film work, like you were saying. And when he was bringing people in for this, he was bringing people in that like were from commercials, right? Like he brought in like his filmmaker, sorry, his cinematographer from making commercials with him. He brought in like I think some of the actors were from commercials as well. I think there was like one. I think Gorgeous might have been like the only recognizable actor name at the time who played her, the actor. But otherwise, I think like this was all like, for lack of a better word, like amateurs to film, right? Like these were people that were making commercials, right? And he has like this incredible power as a director to take this and turn it into something that truly is remarkable today, right? Like uh, I don't really know how well this was received at the time. I think it was kind of I would guess that this was probably oddly received, right? Like I would guess that most people at the time were not like going to go out and rewatch this. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it got pretty mixed reviews like at first. I could imagine watching this in the theater and just being confused more than anything.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think it's aged so well. It's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I don't know. What should we get into the? Is there anything else you wanted to mention in particular? Should we just get into the plot a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. We can just jump right into plot.
Yeah, I mean the
Um,
opening sort of sequences, it does have a pretty big section before they get to the house, and the tone is very weird. It's kind of dreamlike, kind of like a heightened, almost like sitcom-ish kind of a thing. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's that sequence when the guy like falls down the stairs and gets stuck in a bucket, and it has the stop motion of him falling down the stairs with the bucket in a bucket. I love that part. That part always makes me laugh. Um, and yeah, you're pretty much introduced to all these girls, and all of them they have basically like one character trait. So like Gorgeous is like the main girl, and she's pretty, and then there's Prof, who's the nerdy one with the glasses, and she's all into science and stuff like that. And then there's Kung Fu, who is knows Kung Fu, and there's Melody, who plays music, and there's Mac, who really likes to eat food.
yeah, it's
So
amazing. Even the names of these characters, it's really spot on.
yeah, it's very like simple characterization, but honestly, it really works for the movie because it's not a long runtime and just seven teenage girls could become like easy to uh lose them. But I feel like with these broad characterizations and like sort of on the nose, like funny characterization, it just makes everyone more memorable so you can keep track of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I think thinking back to some of what Obayashi talks about as like reasons why he makes some of these decisions, he picked seven people because that was like the number of people in like a fighter squad or something during World War II, something like that. This was like very heavily like kind of subtly influenced by a lot of World War II stuff that happened um, just before this. He was from Hiroshima, and so this is only what, like 30 years after the bombings in that area. So a lot of that influences kind of bleeds in here. And it was interesting to me that like that was a decision for such a small detail, but just had a huge impact on his life, right? So
Yeah, definitely. And I haven't seen any of his other films, but I do think like the nuclear warfare comes into play in some of his other movies. I think that's like a recurring theme in his filmography, maybe. So that makes
yeah,
sense. I didn't
I know
realize he was
in
from there.
yeah, I know in this the aunt that they end up going to her house, I think she's like very anti-war, right? I think she lost her husband in the war, maybe, and something like that, or at least
Yeah.
I don't know if it's implied or explicit, but there's something in there about like uh her not her being kind of uh anti-war, but
Yeah, there are like flashback sequences of her and her husband, and I think he dies in the war. But then there's also a flashback sequence of Gorgeous's mom and dad, because her mom also died at some point
right.
of oh gosh, I can't remember. But there's like a flashback of, and it's all black and white. Um, but yeah, I think you're right that the aunts, whatever, I guess Gorgeous's uncle died in World War II.
Yeah. It's kind of sad thinking about like uh, Obayashi talked about how he like lost a lot of like his friends and everything back when the bombings happened. And it's really sad to think about like how that influences kind of this story because like just watching this as like a horror fan, it's like, yeah, of course, like a lot of people die. But then it's like also thinking back to the influences and thinking about how the aunt lost her husband before and the husband, the dad lost his wife before, and then everyone also is just slaughtered by this house, right? It's a I think much sadder thinking about the context, but it's a very fun
Yeah,
movie. But
yeah, right. True. Well, one thing I wanted to point out about the movie that I really loved was all the background the skies and all the matte paintings in the background. So this was all shot on sets. And it's very obvious like the movie's clearly very artificial, and that's like it's not trying to hide that or anything. It takes that to its advantage, I think. But yeah, the skies all look really fantastic, and again, it adds to the heightened like version of reality that this is set in.
yeah, I thought that was it. Just always looks gorgeous too. It's really fun. All the skies they just look so well painted. I think all the sets really like come together. Like you said, it's very obvious that it's sets, but in a way where like it does benefit the movie and maybe not when it came out like that might have been one of the things that certainly got like mixed reviews but I think today it's easy to see it and be like enjoy it for what it is, right?
Yeah. Yep. And one thing going on at the beginning of the movie, there's Gorge's stepmom, or she's about to be her stepmom. That's sort of an inciting incident of, I think Gorgeous was originally supposed to go with her dad somewhere else for like summer vacation. But then he introduces Gorgeous to her like future stepmom, and Gorgeous is not happy about it. So she decides to go to her aunt's house and she invites her friends. Um, but that's sort of an inciting incident. Um, and then it comes back at the end with the stepmom at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, which interesting here. The like theme or the fear of that stepmom character, perhaps, or whatever. I wonder how, like, I wonder what his daughter was like projecting there. If it was, I mean, I think some of this stuff is very obvious, like just fears of a kid, right? Like the grandfather clock and the piano, but the stepmom being the bad person, I guess that is like kind of just a trope in storytelling, right?
Yeah, that is a very common thing of like the kid not wanting their one of their parents to be like replaced, kind of a thing. They're like, who's this new person? I don't like the new step parent thing. That is just a really common trope. But
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, especially like if a kid's already kind of grown up and then there's a new person getting thrown in, I get why that makes sense. Why it would be tough to adjust to.
Yeah, definitely. Also, when they get to, or actually still at like when they're at the school at the very beginning, and they're like it's introducing to all the characters. you're like really quickly thrown into the editing of this movie, which is just amazing. At first, it's actually a little jarring, I think, for like the first couple times for me when watching it, I was like, what am I watching? But then you realize what you're watching, you know. But there's these like really fun like circle zooms, right? Kind of like Bugs Bunny-esque or something.
Yeah, or it'll like fade, like superimpose another shot, but only like in a circle in the center of like someone's face,
Yeah.
but it's on top of another shot. A lot of very creative editing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very creative, and I think that was a little jarring the first time, like just right away in the first couple minutes. But it like I think it's quickly dispelled and quickly enjoyable. But there's also a really funny. I like vividly remember a really funny shot when all the girls are like sitting on a bench at the school, and then behind them you just see people walking, but then you see them walking in reverse. Like it's just like a backward shot or like a shot played in reverse. And so you see people like walking backwards. And I just remember being so taken aback. I was like, why? What's going on?
Yeah.
Just like it just adds to all this surrealism of the movie. And I think it's wonderful. Like all the little
Yeah.
details.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And another sort of strange sequence is when they're on the train um, and to the aunt's house. Uh, there's like a little animated sequence with like an animated train, and there's like you're crossfading the shots of the girls on top of the animation and stuff like that. And sometimes it would like you said, just sort of like zoom in on one girl or something like that. Um, and yeah, that's another creative sequence, I guess.
Yeah. Very interesting, very creative stuff. Like even before, I guess, even before you jump into like the haunted house stuff where it gets just like exponentially more creative, I think, each time.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mean, after that, basically they show up. They show okay. This is another part that reminded me of a slasher movie. Is they show up in the town and they ask a guy where the aunt is, and he kind of just tells them like you're gonna die or something like that, or she's gonna eat you or something along those lines. And he's sort of that harbinger of doom stereotype that's in a lot of slasher movies. So I don't know if this was just a coincidence or it's just whatever, but it has that similar structure that almost like a movie like The Cabin in the Woods is actually like kind of the same structure as this, like you know what I mean? But it's kind of just interesting that this is happening parallel in another country, um, but similar ideas.
Right. And it is really interesting because this is really early in the slasher genre here in America. Like Giallo is happening in Italy, but here in America, we've got things like Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw and all that. And it
And
is
Black Christmas
still
is Canadian.
that's right. That's right. No, in the North American area, I
Yes.
should say. But
Yeah.
that's right.
Not trying to be a dick. Be like, it's Canadian technically.
I mean, I should have known. We just covered it not too long ago. So embarrassing.
Canada's just America's hat. All right. Come at me, Canadians.
Ooh, tense moments in political history here.
Just kidding. I'm kidding. We like Canada. Good for them.
But
I'm just jealous of their healthcare.
yeah, that's real. But yeah, this is really early in the slasher tropes being developed, right? And so it's very fascinating to see uh, what today is a slasher trope kind of being developed, like you said, parallel to all this other stuff going on. And it's interesting to think about just like was this movie somewhat influential to the slasher structure? Probably not, because it's kind of underground, I think, at the time. But also, it's just interesting. That at least borrows from some of those concepts so early on.
Yeah, and that's like a thing in just human storytelling through time is there these recurring themes will pop up like across cultures that would have never had contact or anything like that. And there's just some types of stories that like appeal to humans, I guess. I don't know. And it's just sort of part of the human condition or the way we understand things. So, but yeah, kind of
I'll
cool.
tell you what, I do love a good slasher.
I know. That's why it's like your favorite genre of
That's
movies,
right.
probably.
Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, I do agree. The Harbinger of Doom here is a very interesting addition that comes back later on too. So it's not even just like a throwaway line or anything. I mean, it's not super relevant later on, but it does come back, which is cool.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, after that, they obviously don't listen to him because why would they? He's just a crazy watermelon salesman.
They do buy
What
a
is it?
watermelon though.
Oh yeah, Mac buys, or yeah, she does buy it. Yeah, you think she steals it, and then she's like, "No, don't worry, I paid for it," something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, then they go to the aunt's house, um, and yeah, it's she's in a wheelchair and she has a cat named Blanche. Well, I guess the cat is actually Gorgeous's, right? Is the
Well, I don't
because
know.
isn't the cat's on the train, right?
No, I thought the cat was at the house. There's like a painting of the cat at the house too and everything.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't
I
know.
could be wrong, but I would say I think the cat is from the house.
Probably,
That's my
probably.
guess.
But for some reason, I felt like the cat was on the train, but I could be
Hmm.
wrong. Maybe I was just remembering. Anyway,
It could
doesn't
also
matter.
be there could also totally be like a weird edit with the cat for some reason, like someone like envisioning the cat or something on the train. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. But
There's a lot of
anyway,
surreal stuff going on here. So
yeah, that's true. So yeah, they get to the house, and yeah, I mean, pretty much, I mean, right away, I guess everything's okay, but Mac puts the watermelon in a well to keep it cold, which I guess is a thing that people would do back in the day. Um,
amazing. Amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
no refrigerator. So you just you just put it on a string or a rope and then you just lower it down into the well until you want it.
yeah, pretty cool. And then they're having dinner, and well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is there anything else that goes on before Mac gets turned into a watermelon?
No, I think that's like so yeah, that's it. Right. They have dinner and then Mac sneaks out to go get the watermelon, I think. Uh and finds oh no, yeah.
Fantasy is the one. Fantasy is the character who like finds all the dead bodies, basically. Like
That's
it's like,
right.
damn, fantasy keeps on running into bad news. But like Mac goes out and then she never comes back, and they're eating dinner. They're eating watermelon, and the aunt has like the eyeball in her mouth that fantasy sees, and she's like, "What the?" You know?
But yeah, didn't Fantasy thought that she saw the she like pulls the watermelon out, but she thinks it's a head. And she
Well, yeah,
thinks it's
she
Mac's
sees
head.
Mac's head, and then Mac's head like starts talking and kind of like attacks her.
Ah, it's so good.
Yeah, that's a great scene. That's like the first like fully wacky like horror sequence.
Yeah. And this
Um,
is in front of one of those wonderful backdrops, right? So it was just such a surreal and fun moment. Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, and then she just like runs back inside and she's all freaked out. Her name is Fantasy, so no one believes her, obviously, right? But but yeah,
Imagine if this was like real life, like your name just predicts your characteristic, your one thing, you know. Your
yeah,
name's Melody, you sing. You know, your name's Fantasy, nobody's gonna believe you.
yeah. Also, I just realized the first thing when they get to the house, the chandelier like shakes and then like
Oh
falls and
yeah,
kills a lizard. And
that's
then
right.
the cat, I think, eats the lizard or something like that. So I think that's another like little foreshadowing of like, oh, something's not right, you know?
Yeah, and Kung Fu does some awesome like I don't know if she actually kicks anything, but she definitely does some cool jump and you get to see right away that her name's Kung Fu for a reason.
Yeah, yep. So but like a lot of this part is kind of the girls doing just like chores around the house kind of a thing, like helping out and cleaning the dishes after dinner and stuff like that. And then some crazy shit will go down just like here and there while they're split up, basically.
Yeah, and they kind of get picked off kind of when they're alone, right? It's like you know the rule to a slasher: never be alone, right?
I know they didn't know the rules back in 1977 though. They
That's
had to
right.
wait till Scream 19 years later. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we start to see like them all get picked off. We see the one of them gets killed by a mattress. That was awesome. Thrown around the room with all the mattresses and all the materials being thrown around the room at the same
yeah,
time. Uh, and
yeah,
then and I think Fantasy sees that from outside the door and is trying to get in, but like watches her friend get eaten by a mattress.
Yeah. Yes. So one thing that happens, I think that's happening concurrently, is like that section where Gorgeous she was like in front of the mirror and she like breaks off almost into like glass and turns into like fire.
Oh yeah.
So that happens early on. I think that's her sort of being like possessed or like turned, you know what I mean? Something like that. By the house or by her aunt. And
Mhm.
then that is happening, I think, while Sweet, I think, is yeah, Sweet is the one who gets killed by the bedding when she's trying to set up the beds or whatever. So that's the second kill is Sweet, but sort of at the same time, I think, as Gorgeous with that really cool scene. That's an iconic shot too of her kind
Yeah.
of turning into glass. I don't know how to describe it, but
Yeah. And again, these are like just really cool things to be like killers in this house. Like the well, right? A well is just creepy, right? It's archaic. Even at the time, like in the 70s, people weren't using a well, right? Like at least certainly not that often, right? And I think they even acknowledge that in the movie. But it is creepy, right? It's archaic and creepy. And the same like creepy old squeaky springy mattresses that can be weird and creepy, right? And so it makes sense that all these things are like fears created by Obayashi's daughter to to really make this feel so scary to like to everyone because it's these like universal things that you're like just inherently afraid of, right?
yeah. And another one is Melody getting killed by the piano,
Oh,
which
it's
might
so
be
good.
the yeah, is that the best kill in the movie probably?
Oh yeah. I mean, this
Yeah.
is really like you see a little bit of special effects in all of them, right? But like the piano there's so much going on here with like the I don't know if it's prosthetics or just blue screened out fingers as they get chopped off by the piano, eaten by the piano, literally eaten alive. And all like everything that's going on here is just absolutely brilliant. It's so fun
Yeah, this scene is awesome. It's very iconic and just super cool.
and
Yeah.
very bloody.
Yeah, it is pretty bloody. Yeah, but it is a person getting eaten by a piano, so I imagine that might be bloody.
Oh
She's kind of
yeah.
getting chopped up.
um, Also, the piano was really fun because they kind of kept going back to melody and being like, play us a tune, like help us, dissociate from everything that's happening, right? And you can tell that she gets like continuously less and less willing to do that and like less excited about it, right? Like at first she's excited to play the piano, but then as it goes on, she's like more and more like, guys, I don't want to be here either. Like my friends are dying too, like I can't comfort us with music because I'm hurting, right? And then eventually she gets eaten alive by this thing that she's slowly like less and less interested in even doing, right? But
Yep. Yeah, yeah. And that kill is amazing. And then there's sort of the climax of the movie, where we find out that the aunt is like she died, but she's a ghost basically in the house because she was unmarried or something, and she eats any unmarried girl that goes into the house basically. So that's sort of the explanation of what's happening. Um, but yeah, so that happens, and uh, Kung Fu, Prof, and Fantasy, I think, are the ones that are left. Yeah. So they're like the final ones, and this is sort of the big climax of the movie, and the house starts going absolutely crazy. Like the doors lock on their own, and Kung Fu is like fighting sort of like Gorgeous's ghost, it seems like.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, because she's like possessed by, like you said, like the cat or the house or the aunt or something. It's never
yeah.
really clear what is the the producer of this like haunting, right? Is it the house? Is it the aunt? Is it the cat? It often implies the cat, but I love that cat.
Yeah, the cat's eyes will do that little like green like shine with the little sound effect. So it's like
Yeah,
the cat is activating like magic or something. But it seems like the aunt is in control of the cat or something, or I don't know.
yeah, yeah. It's
But
very funny because it doesn't care to explain this. It just like yeah, it explains that like she whatever the aunt is trying to kill the unmarried but blah blah blah, right? But this movie is not about that plot, right? Again, it's not trying to explain to you. It's not trying to build up a lot of lore. it's just trying to give you a good time.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And yeah, I mean, there's that whole sequence of Kung Fu and Prof getting sort of the house is flooding with like blood, um, and like Prof drowns in the blood, and Kung Fu is like on like a raft, like Titanic style.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so
It
I
was
guess at the
cool
end, well, yeah, what's up?
in that when she's getting like when she's in the water and like drowning or whatever, the blood or whatever it is, she's getting like it looks like she's kind of getting like disintegrated, like dissolved. And apparently they did that by like just he Obayashi had her like suspended in the air, I think, and was like pouring buckets of blue paint on her. So that the blue paint was like totally random where we'd go, but of course you could like key that out, right? And so she's like covered slowly more and more by this blue paint that gets cut out, and then it's just less and less of her that you end up seeing. So it's this really brilliant way to make like what today is a pretty, I assume, a pretty remedial effect, right? Like I'm not a, a cinematographer or an editor or anything, but I would assume that today we have much easier ways to do that. But at the time, I mean, it just feels so brilliant to just dump paint on someone and then just take it out, right? And it makes it look so fun and surreal.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that that's how they did that effect, but that's an awesome little background thing of that. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, stuff like that is like what gives this movie such a charm, I think, of it having that handmade like feel. And it
absolutely.
just feels totally unique. Like, I mean, I have that list on our letterbox of like recommendations, and I was like, what the hell do I recommend for House? Like, I guess you could watch an Obayashi movie, but I haven't seen them, so I can't recommend them. And then uh nothing is like this. Like, it's completely unique, really, I think. So I ended up doing Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is nothing like this, but also just as unique and weird. So I was like, all right, if you like weird things, this is another weird Japanese thing that's not like anything else. So I
Yeah.
went for just something else that was unique. But that just emphasized to me how one of a kind this movie is. And it really feels like a like uh what's the word? Not flash in the pan, but like perfect everything came together perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think like uh, I think I'm biased here. On the Criterion disc, there's a wonderful interview with Obayashi where he goes through like, and it's like a 40-minute long interview or something. He goes through like so many different stages of making this movie and emotions that went into it, and his daughter is involved too, so you hear from her as well. And so I think I admittedly I might be a little biased here, but I think he plays a huge part in making this so unique. His one, obviously his editing, right? This is his special effects and editing, but also his like willingness to take these really underground actors that have very little, if any, experience and turn them into like these really wonderful characters, both by designing the characters in a way that they're uh, in a sense very simple, but also by helping direct them. There's this story of him directing them and having a hard time doing like verbal direction, right? Like telling them what to do and all that. So instead, he would just play the score to the movie, which was already out. The score came out actually like a whole year before the movie. He partnered with a band at the time to do the score of the movie, and since it was already out, he was able to play it during like times when they should be rehearsing or doing their acting, and they were able to just like dance. And that's why it kind of at times feels very choreographed in like a musical way, because they're actually like moving along to the music that you're hearing as the score, and they're moving along to it too. And so it's this like really brilliant way to get them uh to express themselves and to jump into this acting when they might not feel as comfortable because they're kind of new at it, right? So
Yeah.
it's really amazing.
Yeah. This is fantastic. And yeah, I don't think I've seen those interviews, but I should watch them. I should have for the episode, I guess, but whatever.
Nah,
It
no.
is what it
I
is.
mean, I'll say like if anyone out there that has this movie on Criterion, I would totally recommend watching that at some point. Um, but I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, first I just recommend watching this movie. I'm just gonna jump to it. I know we're not done yet, but if you haven't guessed yet, well, I think we probably both recommend this movie pretty strongly.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, we never gave our spoiler warning too.
That's right.
Spoiler alert. So if you're already
Yeah.
at we've already talked about the entire plot of the movie. But
Although again, this
what
really isn't a movie you're watching for the plot. You have to
no,
experience
but
this
we
movie.
did explain all the cool deaths and stuff. If
That's true.
someone so spoiler alert uh, whatever.
I feel
Whatever,
like
it's
you
fine.
really can't spoil this movie because you really have to see it to even believe it. It's like
Yeah, it's
it's
true.
so unique.
Yeah, yeah. It does need to be seen to be believed. But
Yeah.
so yeah, the one last thing I wanted to mention, one other
Yeah.
scene. There's this element in the movie of I think it's sweet or I think it's sweet, I don't remember. But one of them has Mr. Togo is on his way and she has a crush on him. Mr. Togo is their teacher, I believe. And she has a crush on him and she sort of imagines him as her knight in shining armor and he's trying to get there and he's the sort of the last hope for them that maybe he'll get to the house, but he's stuck in traffic, etc. He gets to eat because he was hungry, so he stops to eat noodles. Um, and then he finally gets there, like at around sunrise after pretty much everyone's dead. This is at the very end of the movie. And the Harbinger of Doom is there. And I forget exactly what happens, but then later on, Gorgeous's maybe he gets there at night. He probably gets there during the night. And then in the mornings, Gorgeous's stepmom gets there and she sees in his car, he has turned into bananas. He
That's
is
right.
now a pile of bananas wearing a hat. And it's awesome. Yeah.
Man, it's it's one of these like brilliant things that I think because this movie was written by his daughter, who was so young at the time, these are things that like I feel like we just never see in mainstream media because like I don't know why. It's like maybe people just think this stuff is childish, but it's so good and so fun. And it works so incredibly well.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it works for the tone. Like
Yeah.
they play into the comedic tone the whole time, and that is part of the reason it works so well, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this also like being in the 70s, this is like kind of a hippie-ish kind of a movie, it seems like to me. Like, I don't know, there's like the end credits like song and
Oh yeah.
there's a song toward the end. Um, and I don't know, it just seems like it has that free spiritedness that like that sort of the hippie movement brought to culture. And
Yeah.
maybe he was, I don't know if he was influenced by that at all, but because obviously things are different in Japan. But I think in the 60s in the 60s in Japan were still a pretty like revolutionary period for Japanese culture from I think. Um, so, but it just has that type of like it's very free spirited, very irreverent, and it doesn't feel the need to play by any rules, and it just makes for such an exciting and fun viewing experience.
Yeah, and I think that he probably is influenced by all of this because, for example, he talks a lot about how he intentionally titled the house in English, the movie in English, House. He didn't title it, the
How soon?
Japanese, yeah, right, Hausu, and he intentionally titled it House because he was trying to be somewhat rebellious and somewhat, uh, you know. Hippie-ish, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that's really the words he would use, but he was trying to, stand out in this realm, and that's part of why he did that, and part of also why at the end that song you mentioned, there's a song that's sung in English. It's a Japanese band, but it's an English song.
Yeah,
The lyrics are in
yeah,
English.
yeah. So the opening credit being in English was something I noticed too. So yeah, that does make sense. That I think in this time there was a lot of Western influence in Japan, and clearly I think he must have been influenced by that. But
Yeah, and it's kind of it's funny because like watching this movie, you can tell that this movie is rebellious, right? Like this movie isn't trying to like this movie is not trying to be mainstream necessarily. This isn't like a Hollywood movie, obviously, right? And not that necessarily means rebellious, but I think that along with a lot of these like choices that he even admits, like most Japanese directors would not do, right? This is the first Japanese movie made by a Japanese director that has an English title screen. And that's at least what he says. And so, like, there's a lot of, you know, uh, rebellious tones here that I think are reminiscent of like hippieism in America.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does have I think rebelliousness is a good way to describe it because it's very like anarchic, like intentionally like tearing down all these expectations and the conventions of how you would make a movie or how you would edit a scene or why would this be animated? Why would there be a stop motion thing of a guy falling down the stairs with a bucket on his ass? Like,
Exactly.
he just wants to do whatever and be as creative as possible. And I think that's part of the reason that it's gained such a cult following is that it's fun and it's lighthearted, but also it still goes against the grain and does its own thing.
Yeah. And I think that it really, I think that it really benefits from like, keeping that tone the whole time, like you said, and just really going for it and just trying to do all of these weird edits that like at times I do think come off jarring for your first watch at least, right? Especially at the very beginning. And then as you sink more into it, you're kind of absorbed into this world and just loving it the whole time, I think. At least that was my experience.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So yeah, I mean, I love this movie. I don't know if I have that much else to say about it. It is kind of a hard movie to talk about. I know that we talked for like over an hour, so I guess it's not that hard to talk about. But just because it is like you can't really sum up the experience in words, and you know what? That's kind of the way it should be, right? And in honor of David Lynch, that's what he says. You know what I mean? The movie is the thing. There's that whole thing about him talking about when you make a movie, everyone wants to do interviews and have you talk about the movie, and he's like, "Well, the movie does the talking." So it's kind of ironic that we have a movie podcast, I guess, where we literally talk about movies. But but this is kind of that thing where it's just a unique experience, you know.
Yeah.
So long story short, before we get into our ratings, or should we do our ratings first, then do the general ratings?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. If you're watching a lot of our episodes, we have this like metric where we take a lot of collated data from really just four sources: from Letterboxd, Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is audience score, and IMDb. So critic and audience score for Rotten Tomatoes, and we just average that out to see what the general reception is, I guess, out of 10. We're just interested in that to see how we kind of compare to the larger audience, at least whatever. And we usually just do that we started by doing that like at the very beginning, and then it kind of drifted into whenever we think about it during the episode. So we're deciding to move that officially to when we do our ratings at the very end. I think maybe
Keep
we'll
all
do
the
this.
rating discussion together.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we'll do this before. Maybe we'll talk about the general reception and then bleed into ours, perhaps.
Sure. Sounds
Um,
good to me.
I don't know if there's really a right way to do that, but whatever. I think
It's our show. We can do whatever the hell we want.
that's right. And if you don't like it, just kidding.
Go fuck yourself.
Throwback, by the way. That's a callback. So if you've been
Yeah, that
following
is a
us,
callback.
we've said that to you before.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, audience. No, just kidding. Only if you don't like it. All right, Ryan. What are the general reaction online for this?
So House Online is received fairly well for the most part. It gets 4.0 on Letterboxd, 91% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 7.3 on IMDb, and 78% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So there's like a pretty clear distinction between Rotten Tomatoes critic score and the rest, but it all averages out to 8.05 out of 10, which is a very good rating.
Too low.
I agree. It is too low. I give it 5 stars.
Yes, I also give it 5 stars. It's hell yeah.
It's so good.
Another double 5 star.
That's
Hell
right. Yeah,
But yeah,
we gotta love when there's a banger, you know?
yes. And I do understand why people might not like this movie. It's not like I watch this, I'm like, oh man, everyone would love this. Like, you have to be on its wavelength. So it's not surprising that it's a little bit lower but 5 stars for me for sure.
That's right. Yeah, I could agree with that. And I see why like the critic score might be a little bit higher because you're not going into it maybe unexpectedly if you're going into it with that lens. Whereas if you're just going into it just to like watch a movie, you might be you might be kind of confused. You might be taken back.
Yeah, definitely. But this is our second double 5-star movie. The first one was What's Up, Doc?
Oh, that's right.
So there we
Both
go.
both comedies.
Yeah, yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Well,
All right. Well, I
also
guess
both
that's
both in the 70s.
yeah, true. Both
That's
70s.
interesting.
Yeah, 70s. I think the 70s was my favorite era for movies, probably.
Mine too, I think.
But
At least in a way, this is an interesting small little thing is I think about this sometimes because on Letterboxd your stats will like tell you your like your favorite decades or whatever, right? And mine is the 70s by a really good amount. But part of that I'm sure is because I'm not going to go back and watch a movie from the 70s uh, and not very often like totally hate it. I'm
yeah.
going back to watch movies that I know about or I've heard about more often than not, at least. Whereas like movies nowadays, I live right next to the theater. Like I'm gonna go and watch like Craven the Hunter. I didn't watch that, but like I'll go out and watch a bunch of movies in the theater and
Yeah,
half the time be disappointed.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. Mine, I think my top decades are like the 50s, 60s, and like the 40s. Which also makes sense because like yeah, like you said, I'm not going to go back as much. I think in the 70s I would be more likely to be like, well, this looks like this is just okay, but I kind of want to watch it.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, and then like I guess like the 2010s are pretty awesome, but because that's when I was getting into movies, so that makes sense. But 70s great era across America, Japan, all sorts, France, all sorts of places. So
yeah. Yeah, not
yeah,
quite like super related because I've mentioned these before, but I'm going to mention it again. If you haven't seen the Bloodthirsty trilogy, which is Lake of Dracula, Evil of Dracula, um, and I know this because I'm recommending it right now, and The Vampire Doll, which are a series of movies by Mikio Yamamoto in the 70s. They are wonderful Japanese horror movies from the 70s, similar time frame, but very different movies. They're much more serious. But yeah, just gotta throw that out there.
cool, cool. All right. Well, I guess we're wrapping this episode up. If next week will be episode 10, we are oh yeah, we're doing movies about movies. So we're doing State and Maine, the David Mamet movie, and we're doing Shadow of the Vampire. So those are our, go out, watch them. We'll talk about them next week. I think that'll be fun. And we don't quite know what we're doing for 10.5 yet. We've got some ideas, so we'll figure it out. We'll let you know next week.
Yeah. And keep the suggestions flowing, by the way. A few people have been suggesting stuff on our reels and some of our comments. So please keep those flowing. You guys hopefully know how to get in touch with us. We're on Letterboxd. If you just type in Mind Your Movies, you'll find our Letterboxd profile, which has links to everywhere: Instagram, YouTube, all the podcast streaming sites. And of course, you can also email us at mindyourmovies@gmail.com.
Mind Your Movies podcast at gmail.com.
Dang it.
There you go. This is,
Well,
yeah. And we got Instagram too. There's Mind Your Movies podcast, I think, on Instagram. But
yeah. Yep.
yep,
So
yep.
find us
All right.
wherever, send us your recommendations, and we'll see you next time.
And watch House on Halloween. It's a good group watch movie.
Hell yeah.
Bye.
All right, everyone. See you.